I'm Paul Finch, Programme Director at World Architecture Festival, and it's my pleasure to be talking to Paul Flowers, Chief Design Officer at LIXIL Global, covering everything from product design to branding. Paul, welcome. The theme of WAF 2024 is a one-word concept, tomorrow. Now, all architects and designers, of course, are concerned with the future, because even if they're working on old buildings, let's say, every decision they're making, every specification, every design approach is always about something that's going to happen in the future. And we thought this would be an interesting theme, and I think it's sort of doubly interesting for people who are manufacturing and designing the products that architects are going to be specifying, perhaps not today, but in 1 or 2 or 3 years' time. And the first thing I wanted to ask you today was, what sort of time frame do you use to think about where our products are going, where our concepts are going?
Well, good morning, Paul. Obviously this is going to be a big answer. That's an expansive question for us, because as designers, as creatives, we spend so much of our lives trying to understand what will come next. You know, how will we improve things? So by definition, there has to be change in order for you to improve something from where it was to where it could be. When we talk about the future, I used to have a concept about the future. It was about inventing the new and the purposeful. But actually, more and more, we've found out that inventing the future, or trying to understand at least what the future could be, it's really about understanding context. And especially when you're working on more complex products or services, it's about understanding what will be the whole ecosystem around that thing when it lands. And when you're talking about the future, if it's an innovation in particular, you really have to understand what will be the grounds or the field that will make that particular product or service more useful, and what would we need in place for, even though you jump forward, to ensure that the consumer is coming along, or the architect specifying our products, to ensure that the context is relevant. Because obviously, even before we talk about the future, if you go too soon, it's irrelevant. If you go too late, you're a follower. So it's really about that understanding of context. And I think great designers, great companies, great architects, great creatives, they can anticipate and, let's say, have their personal view about what the future could be, but the brilliant ones really understand the context that might be when it arrives. And there's loads of examples. You can use Apple with the apps. It's not a telephone. What made that particular product really successful was the personalization and having all these individual elements, the ecosystem, which actually didn't even exist when those products came to market. So that's what we have to do, much more holistically. Now, in a brand like ours, it takes anything from 12 to 24 months to bring a product into production. So of course, we have to bake that in to what we're producing and how far we want to lead the field or let's say trends. And so we're very mindful of that. And there's a longevity to our products. They last, 10, 15, 20 years. So we also bake that in because, there's it's very, very complex. But if we're talking about the future and inventing new trends, if there's short-term trends like CMF, we also have the responsibility for them not to become obsolete super quickly, because then consumers are unnecessarily changing things out, and that's not good for the environment or resource. So big, long answer, but lots in there.
Yes, the context question is fascinating. One of our thoughts in choosing the theme of tomorrow was a comment by the late, great architecture critic Rainer Banham. And he said that architecture was the history of the immediate future. And you can kind of get that because, in a way, by the time you have an idea about something, by the time it becomes reality, you're having other ideas about other things. It's already become, in a sense, a part of history. And I suppose that leads us to a question of the changing contexts that you've had to respond to or take a lead in recent years, from the sort of period when grower transformed from, if you like, an engineering-led production company to same production values, but a design-led operation. And I wonder if you can think back a bit and say, well, the context emerging at that time have now come to fruition, but might be changing. Any thoughts about that?
That's really, I never really thought of it in that sense, but absolutely. If you, like you say, with Grower in the past, it was really well known for its quality and its technology and engineering. But again, context changed. So consumers, they love that, and they still love that about the brand. It's a really key pillar of the brand. But actually, the context changed where consumers say, okay, we understand as a brand, this is what you offer. We really like that. We're willing to interface with your brand. But at the same time, the context changes that we've seen over time now. Consumers actually, they require more personalization, more customization. There are all these things that have changed in context, which are separate. And what we call that at Grower and at LIXIL, we talk about different things. We talk about a company lens and we talk about consumer lens. And we do that coming back to context, because what we say is we have a company lens where we have assets in place, factories where we make things, where we produce things, processes that we use, things that are all, let's say, baked into our lens as a company. But then we have this consumer lens to ensure we're relevant. Because if you don't track the consumer lens, Kodak's a famous example of this, I guess. One could use Kodak. But if you don't track what the consumer actually requires and customers or users of our products, whether they be architects or installers, if we don't have a good understanding and the context in which they operate, we'll do everything that's great for the company, but would be obsolete or irrelevant. So that's how we keep our relevance. We have those two lenses. In fact, we have three. We have a sustainability lens to ensure that what we produce is good for the company, it's great for the user, the consumer, but also considers the environment. So having those lenses keeps an objective approach. And the consumer lens in particular is the one that gives us the greater context.
Because I'm thinking that the rise of individual desire as a driving force for everything from how you design your house to how you design your products is, I think, relatively recent. I mean, we've moved from mass production, which means making the same thing available to the maximum number of people, to using mass production with today's technology to try to individualize where that's possible. I'm thinking, for example, at the high end of your market, of your whole Grower Spa initiative, where the consumer gets a choice of almost all the individual elements in terms of the look and feel and the material itself. And I suppose that's an extreme example of individual desire being transformed into a production process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point, because many companies will shy away from that because that's complexity. Company lens, that's complexity. It's very difficult to handle those individual requests. But when you have the consumer lens, you lean into that because you understand if consumers have this desire and we can deliver that, that's up to us how we do that. But the consumers will reward brands who can deliver that for what they need, for their needs. And we've seen, particularly like the brands you talk about, Grower Spa, we've seen a move even further on now. We've seen a move from this concept of customization to personalization. So customization is we have options and consumers can choose from them. And we have lots of those elements, let's say, in our Grower Spa collections, in our Grower collections. But personalization now, where you could create that one-of-one, that's something where we've had to move into new areas of technology, like 3D printing, generative design, AI. All of those new technologies are affording us, let's say, an opportunity as a company to bring something to the consumer that they clearly have a desire for in a commercial way. And that's why in Milan, you saw in Salone del Mobile this year, we had different types of products, from the customization products with a new range called Allure Gravity, to our 3D, what we call Tier 1, which is a one-of-one, working with architects, working with consumers individually to create a one-on-one product for them. So that's really pushing technology, really bringing the company lens, consumer lens, you know, in a very, very unique, bespoke one-of-one way.
And did that, this kind of tier one product approach, because it's not exactly a product, did that emerge as the result of new technologies? I mean, was it the technology that led the design on that, or were there things you wanted to do as designers where you suddenly realised, well, actually, that would have been incredibly difficult even 10 years ago. Now it's not so difficult.
Do you know, this is fascinating. It ties on to so many things. We had to really look at our entire innovation process for this reason. Because what we said was actually, what we need to do is rather than just invent technologies and then try to find a consumer or a buyer or a user, what we should do is go back to insights. So we should really be much more consumer centric, and we should really try to understand what do consumers want, and also what do consumers not know at this stage what they want, because they can't envisage a context that doesn't exist yet. That's our job. So that's why we do things like ethnographic research, latent needs research, because we don't want them just to articulate what they want, because they'll articulate what they see around them in the current context. So we do lots of research to understand what are their needs, and we see, okay, there's a move to this individualization. And the more premium it gets, the more the consumer expects a one-of-one, a bit like a tailored suit. You know, you can have various, let's say, high street stores that deliver different qualities of clothing, but actually a bespoke suit is something that's very personal for you. And one would expect to pay more for that and the quality to be good. So it's a bit like that. So we track with our approach of looking at the insights, and then we take that insight and we say, okay, what's the opportunity? Because we're a business, what's the commercial opportunity here? And then we say to ourselves, right, that's the insight, that's the kind of, it could be a consumer pain point or whatever. Here's the opportunity where we bring in things like context that the consumer can't articulate. And then we say to ourselves, right, what kind of technologies would we need to realize that? That's much more efficient than just developing loads of technologies, then trying to find a way to market those through. It's really understanding people's needs, what their needs might be in the future, and then can we deliver that in a commercial way? Now, whether that's delivering that in scale through our factories, whether that's delivering that through one-of-one 3D printing, technology for us is an enabler. It shouldn't really lead exactly what you do, because it can lead you to something that doesn't intersect with the consumer. And if you just listen to the consumer, they don't understand context, so that could lead you into a direction where there's no progress at all. So we have to balance all those very subtle elements.
And possibly no customers.
And no customers, which wouldn't be good.
Well, I always remember that very simple example you talked to me about years ago, which was the question, wouldn't it be nice if when you turned your shower on, it was the exact temperature you would like it to be, rather than wasting a minute or so as freezing water came out before the heat kicked in. Now, you guys solved that long ago, but in a way, that sort of approach, I think, is still informing the thinking today.
Absolutely.
It's a sort of, wouldn't it be nice if?
I mean, it's exactly that. I mean, simplified down, it's exactly that. So for the consumer, wouldn't it be nice if this experience was better in this way? So I'll give you an example. So consumers, you know, everybody has a concern about the environment. Everybody has a concern about water consumption, particularly what we've seen, a big spike when you have, let's say, a huge cost of living increase across the world. And you see the cost of water, which we've been predicting for years, you know, really increased. So not only is there a concern about the environment, now there's also, as well as an ecological concern, there's an economical concern of all that water usage. But consumers really want to have a full shower. They don't want to just turn it down so it trickles on them. And then when we look at that, the process is longer to get the shampoo out your hair. So consumers want to have a great shower, but they'd like to reduce consumption. So we're introducing this new product from Grower called Everstream. So again, wouldn't it be nice if I could have a shower guilt-free, using less water in some way or another? They can't articulate how, but that's what the consumers want. So we've created this loop where when you enter the shower, the water comes, and then once you have a shower for, say, a certain amount of time, that water fills into a container, and then it's pumped back into the system, and it's your water but filtered. So you're using that same loop of water, answering that consumer, let's say, insight, but delivering that through technology, that we can now keep them in this loop of water. So we're recycling and filtering so they have a great shower, guilt-free, an amazing experience. And that all comes down to an area at Grower that we call eco-joy, ecological enjoyment. That's the challenge. To reduce consumption isn't a challenge. You just turn the thing down. Don't have a shower. But that's not what consumers want. They want brands that can use advanced technologies, understand their needs, and then deliver them in a way that they can just enjoy. They've rewarded you by buying your product, by being loyal to your brand. You have to reward them with some of these new experiences.
Now, the word aquitecture has been used. I think it was used at your brilliant Milan exhibition this year. And is that a sort of umbrella phrase to describe all these approaches, ecology, technology, production, or is it specific to one area of your activities?
I guess it's a mix of lots of elements which are really important to us. First of all, the aqua part of the water. I mean, Grower is pure Freude an Wasser, pure joy of water. And like we say, when you talk about the pure joy of water, how can we deliver that in a more efficient way? They're some of our challenges, right? So consumers want a great experience with water. They love the concept of the brand, pure joy of water, pure Freude an Wasser. How do we deliver that? So that's one stage with the water. And how can we be inspired by nature to deliver water in a way that's beautiful, like rain, to waterfalls, to all the different ways that we interface with water. And then we've got, one of our key stakeholders, and as you know, we've had a relationship with WAF for more than a decade. One of our key stakeholders are architects and designers. And so we wanted to create a collection, and we did this in Milan, where we were looking at a concept of aquitecture. How could we fuse these amazing water experiences, but so they felt less stuck on to the buildings that the architects were working with, that they felt more infused. So if you can infuse them into the architecture, the very architecture of the building, they feel very homogeneous and they feel natural. So we do that in a way of using materials in a certain way, how those products protrude, so they feel like they're extruded out of the walls of the architecture, and we give the architecture more freedom of materials they can add. So, when architects, we deal with architects and we have lots of insights. When architects are creating an environment, they're dealing with lots of suppliers, let's say like our lighting suppliers, manufacturers of fittings, and what their arduous task is to bring all those elements together, but to create something for the individuals using that is harmonious, and they can navigate through that in a way that makes sense, is intuitive, but hopefully beautiful and poetic and calming and whatever they're trying to get from that space. So giving them this concept of aquitecture, infusing water into the architecture, we believe gives them the freedom to create those kind of environments. So aquitecture is super exciting for us.
It struck me that in the domestic market, people by and large want something better, not necessarily cheaper if it's their bathroom.
Yep.
Another huge part of your market is the hotel market.
Yeah.
We've noticed that in hotel design, this customization or even individualization is also a trend. You walk into, if you're a repeat customer in a hotel chain, you walk into a room, it smells right. Your playlist may be available, etc., etc. And I'm wondering if you see convergence between the desires of individual customers on the one hand in their own homes, but then on the other hand, the hotel market trying to make their bathrooms feel more like what people enjoy in their own home, or is it something, you're in a hotel now, it's even better than your own home? Is this a dilemma or opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I know we've discussed this in the past, this, crossroads of the hotel. It's a really strange kind of concept of hotel, because obviously it's not your home, but you have lots of different consumers of different demographics, of different shapes and sizes, of all these different cultural backgrounds, all descending upon one environment. So how do you truly personalize that environment? Some hotel chains have tried in the past, and it's very difficult to customize that to everybody. So what you start to do is you see a branded concept like you discussed, whether that's a sensorial branded concept, sense, or chromotherapy, lighting, or forms that they use, semantic coding and those things. All of those things give you a branded sense of a hotel. Technology has evolved. So like you say, you used to go to some hotels. I remember back in the day, I'd go to a hotel and they would ask for your playlist in advance so you could send it to them and they could hook it up. Technology has brought so much to the consumer now and into their pocket that they have so much control over their music and stuff. They're looking for some kind of source to project that onto. So when they arrive, their life comes with them in a way. And I think more and more we're going to have to see how does that adapt to them. So using digital and technology. So, when they go to one of our advanced shower toilets, like our Japanese toilets at Grua, Sensi Arena, how do we ensure that as they walk into that hotel room, it has all their presets? And in the cloud, you can do lots of stuff now. When they go to the shower, like you said, the perfect temperature, why shouldn't it know that somebody's going to that shower and this is the temperature they bathe at home? When they walk into the room, these are the kind of light settings they need. So all those things are much, much more available. And I think hotels will gradually have to push more and more into that, at least giving consumers a chance to adapt their surroundings. Because otherwise you have to choose one area, and that's what the branded hotels do right now, to say, this is our brand, this is what we stand for. So if you want to come to us, this is the experience you're going to get. Yeah.
I suppose that underlying everything you're doing at the moment, the influence of AI or the potential future influence is playing a role. And I wonder whether it's a question for manufacturers of reviewing everything you do all the time via AI questionnaires or interrogations or analysis. Or whether it's a slightly more proactive thing where you're using AI to ask different questions, perhaps questions, to use the cliche, that are outside the box, or a mixture of both.
No. Look, AI is super challenging because, relatively speaking, it's just arrived, and it's been around for a long time, but relatively speaking, it's just arrived. And whatever you think pretty much that it can't do today, in the future, I'm sure there will be an element that it can. Will it get to a stage where it even influences what we do and how we do it? For sure. You already have avatars that speak to you and can manage your lives and guide you and. So AI is going to affect so many aspects. When it comes to what we call presets, gathering information about insights, it's really helpful for some of that stuff. It's not particularly great right now at imagining a context that doesn't exist yet. I think that's still quite a human skill. I'm sure it will get to that stage where it will predict, in one way or another, as well as we can predict. But there are so many nuances to context, and we know in the world we live in today, it's like, with the, let's say, global, I would say, impact of things is so much faster, whether that's the economy or whether that's a pandemic. The effect on the global, let's say, footprint is so rapid and so quick now and so felt by everybody. The context changes even faster, and you've got more nuances and you've got cultural elements and all these things. So will AI get to those elements that humans okay at right now and futurists are probably good at right now and creatives? Yeah, maybe it will. Right now, we're using it for some practical things like generative design. We're using it in our design processes where at the very beginning, once we have that insight, once we've listed out that opportunity, we can work with AI to try to understand, what do you think? And it's almost like having another person in the room. It's a great tool. It can go into areas that sometimes we don't have time to. Sometimes we don't have time to visualize out 1,000 things which inspire us. So there's some really nice applications that we already inject into our process. Then you have things like generative design. As a designer, if you're designing or a manufacturer of that glass, there'll be end-to-end where, I can have 50 permutations and it will be able to archive in research to say glasses of this shape on average have sold 22% more than round glasses in the history of X. So it'll be able to dig up data and give you some, let's say, some good information, some good feeling to take out some risk of things. It will give us, let's say, the opportunity to explore lots of different things very quickly, and then we move into production. And that's where Again, we can use AI to really process data, which is really helpful. Stress and strain on things. How would this function better if generative design do 3 versions of that, test those, get the data back, and then we know we're creating the strongest, most robust, most reliable thing. So AI is going to help us tremendously, but I do think there's still a period of human value to add into all these things. And then we talk about the beauty of things and the poetry of things and the love of things. They're very complex emotions that you have to deal with as a designer or a creative when you're trying to build things in and get people to love your product and to love the experience of using the product. There is some beauty and poetry in there, and I think they're very human things right now that I'm very glad to say that we still add value in.
Well, this reminds me of the world of parametric design in architecture, where once you set the parameters up for, well, let's say in the case of an office like Zaha Hadid, it could be a cafe in Hyde Park, Kensington Gardens, or it could be a ski jump, or it could be an apartment building in China, completely different context, completely different scales. But once the parameters are in place, then actually you can produce endless variations, but somebody has to choose the one you're actually going to build. And I think this is interesting. In the world of architecture, of course, that's a familiar activity. It's specifying, we'll do that design before you get onto product specification. But in your case, this is rather different, because in a way, as designers, you start to become specifiers of a particular design, because you don't have the time or need to do 1,000 versions of a glass. When AI can give you 1,000, it'll give you 5,000 if that's what you want. But you still have, in the end, somebody has to decide, well, which one do we think is going to be best? And that has to do, I suppose, with softer values and emotions and histories.
Yeah, it's softer values, again, anticipating the context, bringing all this information, all this data. And like I said, the interesting thing is, research that you do today is often based on what's already happened. But when we talk about shining a light on this dimly lit future we're all trying to understand and move towards, that will only get you so far. Understanding what's already taken place will lead you probably to a similar conclusion to what's already taken place. So for us to move forward, there has to be that element of, like I said, the consumer lens, the company lens, sustainability lens, how all these things are going to come together and deliver something also unique, because you're still anticipating what all your competitive set have delivered. And also legislation is coming in and constantly changing. You have all of these things changing all around you that we have to respond to, like really quickly, constantly, material finishes, CMF, robustness, testing, and all those elements that we have.
Just explain CMF a bit and the implications for what you do.
Yeah, so we call CMF colour, materials and finishing, because you have the aesthetic parts of those. So are they on trend? And we follow lots of macro trends, long-term societal trends, urbanization, health and well-being, these kind of elements that lead us to a certain thing, and sustainability and those things. But when we look at these elements of how we customize with CMF and how we're relevant, we're looking at not only the shorter term trends, which color is relevant, which color fits in, but we're looking at materials, so for, of course, longevity, robustness, lightness. So some materials we're selecting them on weight for transport, because we know we can reduce the carbon footprint of the product in shipping if it's lighter. So the material choices, materials that are easier to recycle, materials that are easier to upcycle, materials that are easier to coat, materials that give us the ability to be robust inside and outside. So we're looking, materials that, architects want to specify a bathroom, let's say, that's really holistic, like I said, in one color. But what they don't understand is our challenge then is, how do we bring all of these materials? How do I get, metal, polymers, silicons, all of those materials that are in our products? How do I get all of those things to have a very similar color? That's a real challenge. And then how do I get that into, and with our team, at LIXIL, how do we how do we ensure then that we can have that in multiple colours and interfaces to give architects and consumers, the freedom to specify the projects that they want to. So colour material finish have many facets. One side we have the kind of more aesthetic side, but also we have the very functional. And people expect grower products to last a very long time, and so we have to test them rigorously, and that's why we focus a lot on the CMF, the colour material finish.
And I suppose as a final question or observation, it's a market where, as you say, the context in which you're selling tomorrow's products is one where vast numbers of people already have one of your products, which they're not going to change for quite a long time because they last quite a long time. So there's that sort of interesting thing between the new is only ever a tiny percentage of the context.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is our challenge. So context is obviously it's even like the context in which a brand like Grower sells its products. So, everybody moves to digital. So everybody's been running, okay, digital, everybody buys everything online. But actually, when you come to a product where there's permanence and real quality dimensions and the feel and the fit and the audio feedback and all those things are really important, it's very difficult to do that online and sell those really important attributes that we spend millions of euros on research and time with engineering and everybody to get these products to feel and interface with the consumer in a really beautiful, unique way. So whilst digital is great and how we go to market through digital is great, actually this is why we invest and go to things like Milan, and we interface with architects at WAF and stuff, because when you're dealing with high quality products like ours that aren't commoditized, you really want to get that in the hands of people. You want to, try to describe a Mercedes car door closing versus one of the lesser brands. It's very difficult to articulate that or show that visually on screen. But when you use that product, and there's that thud and the feeling and the resistance and the quality of movement, that's why we still do the physical. That's why we do invest in things like Milan. We do come to WAF and we do share our products because we want people to, the context, we want them, and even in that sales context, to really feel the difference and to feel the emotion and all the passion and the thousands of hours and millions of investments that go in to these products tirelessly to ensure they're perfect every single time you use them. So it's a bit nerdy. We get very excited about that stuff, but the context is obviously about the future, but it's also even about the context now of how we deliver our products that we have. Because like you say, there's often a small proportion of new, but we want to deliver that in a really relevant way, in a context that people see the difference.
Lovely note to end on. Paul Flowers, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Paul.